Madam Speaker, annual intelligence authorization bills should be bipartisan legislation designed to address critical national security issues and deal in a deliberate and considered way with legislation affecting the intelligence community, the personnel within the intelligence community. Unfortunately, this bill does neither. I'm forced to rise in strong opposition. When this bill was first reported almost 8 months ago, the bill failed to address critical national security issues such as Guantanamo detainees. Attempts by this administration to convert intelligence and counterterrorism into matters of criminal law and meaningful reforms to the congressional notification process. In the nearly 8 months since this bill was reported out of committee, our country has suffered 2 major terrorist attacks and a significant number of near misses. During that time, the majority took no time and no action to bring this bill to the floor. In 8 months, nothing was done to fix the flaws in our intelligence community that were apparent to every American in the wake of the first attack at Fort Hood and later the Christmas bombing attack on an American airliner. In 8 months, nothing was done to clarify who is in charge of interrogation of high-value terrorist detainees, these people that are captured around the world who want to do harm to America. In 8 months, nothing was done to provide a long-term renewal of our critical intelligence authorities under the USA Patriot Act. In 8 months, nothing was done to once and for all stop hardcore radical jihadist terrorists from being brought into the United States, despite the clear opposition that has arisen to this ill-considered idea from average Americans across the country. In 8 months, nothing has been done to clarify how covert actions should be conducted or authorized when they could have deadly effects on American citizens. Nothing has been done. Then you go through and you take a look at the amendments that we wanted to propose that would address these issues, and all of these were thrown out by the majority. An amendment that would direct the DNI to establish a panel to review the intelligence relating to weapons of mass destruction programs of Iran. Politically speaking, our intelligence community is now to the left of the United Nations as to our assessment of what Iran's capabilities are. To the left, the ill-fated national intelligence estimate that came out under the previous administration. We've asked for an independent panel of experts to give us a red team review. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, no, that's not necessary. We asked for an amendment that would require the CIA to release publicly unclassified versions of documents relating to the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. This controversial background as to who knew what when, including some of the leading members of this body. We asked for those documents to be released. The majority said no. We asked for the prohibition of funds from we asked for the prohibition of funds to bring Guantanamo detainees into the United States. The majority said, well, we won't even debate it. We won't consider it. We won't allow for an amendment that would do just that. We asked for a report requiring the DNI to submit a report detailing steps taken to fix problems identified in the President's Fort Hood intelligence review prior to December 25. Why? Because the incident on November 5 had striking parallels to what happened on December 25. And we thought it was fair to ask the question and ask the Director of National Intelligence, with the information that you gained on November 5, what actions did you take that might have helped prevent what happened on Christmas Day? And the answer was no, we don't think that that would be a worthwhile effort to ask the intelligence community those kinds of tough and difficult questions and be held accountable to this body. And then we said, had another amendment that said, don't we think it would be appropriate that we actually establish a process for the authorization and the notification of covert actions that may result in the death of a targeted U.S. citizen. Doesn't get into a debate as to whether that is appropriate, an appropriate course of action. It just says, don't we think that the intelligence community and the executive branch should have in place a detailed process of how these decisions are made, how they are authorized, and when Congress would be notified? And the answer from the majority was no. A process that would give us an idea as to how the administration would authorize and notify Congress when they took actions that might result in the death of a targeted U.S. citizen. A targeted U.S. citizen. And these are just the amendments that were not considered. Substantive, serious issues that the majority is unwilling to debate, to discuss, and to address. Later on, as we go through the day and as we take a look at the manager's amendment and the other amendments, we'll take a look at the striking contrast between what the majority is willing to debate and discuss and to act on and what they are unwilling to debate and discuss. And it has a direct impact on the safety of each and every American. With that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I hope that as we have the general debate on this session, or on this bill right now, that we have at least one person who will come up on the other side and explain exactly what is in the McDermott Amendment, what it means, and what the implication will be to our men and women in the intelligence community. We hear over and over again how we support the intelligence community without a single hearing and perhaps with about 1 minute of debate on the manager's amendment that has been allotted to that McDermott Amendment. We will fundamentally change the nature of the intelligence community, how they work and how they operate by creating new criminal statutes. Not a minute of hearings in this committee, and all of a sudden, nowhere in a manager's amendment. Would someone on the other side please explain the rationale for bringing that in this bill with having no hearings when it will have a fundamental impact on the intelligence community? What is the rationale, and why was the majority unwilling to have hearings on this issue? Why were they unwilling to debate this issue? And why did they bury it into a manager's amendment with 22 other amendments?
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan.
Madam Speaker, I'll yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
There's a lot of things in this bill that are not addressed, that were not allowed to be put in order as we went through the rules process. One of those things is how we are going to deal with the detainees from Guantanamo. You know, at one time they were going to be moved into Kansas. The people in Kansas stood up and said no. They then were going to be moved to Michigan, and the people in Michigan stood up and said no. They then were going to be moved to South Carolina, and the leadership in South Carolina said no, and now it's the people in Illinois that are fighting the valiant battle and saying, no, we don't want them in our state either. And there's been a fundamental problem in each case where the administration has proposed moving these individuals into a state. There's been absolutely no transparency. You know, people in Michigan, people in Illinois, people in South Carolina and Kansas have all asked for the fundamental information of who are these individuals, why are they in Guantanamo, what did they do to deserve to get to be there, what has their behavior been while they have been in Guantanamo. And in each case, for each of those states, we've said, before the states make up their mind as to whether they're going to accept these individuals or not, share this individuals with the policymakers and the decision makers in that state. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is recognized for the balance of the time.
Thank you. My colleague on the other side of the aisle, Chairman Reyes, has said, you know, now is not the time to talk about Gitmo. Obviously, the majority has also said now is not the time to talk about getting an independent assessment of what's going on in Iran. Now is not the time to talk about the release of unclassified versions of documents relating to the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. Now is not the time to talk about bringing the Gitmo folks here. Now is not the time to talk about the time lapse between Fort Hood and Christmas Day and what did and did not happen during that period of time. Now is not the time to talk about a process for the authorization and notification of covert actions that may result in the death of a targeted U.S. citizen. So it's not time to talk about any of those or to debate any of those issues which are absolutely critical to the effectiveness of our intelligence community and keeping America safe. But interestingly enough, it is the day not to talk about, but to bury into a manager's amendment 22 different amendments, including one that will fundamentally change the way our intelligence community has to do business. No hearings, no discussions, no debate. Buried in there is the McDermott Amendment. You know, we're now limited to, at most, 10 minutes per side to talk about 22 amendments in the manager's amendment, which will come up immediately following this general debate. But it's interesting that in the discussion of general debate, not one person on the other side was willing to defend this amendment and the process by which it was included. The process by which it was included, meaning no discussions, no debate, or defend the content of what is included in the manager's amendment. Is this what the process in the House has now come down to? That we bury these critical amendments between 22 other amendments? And maybe now we'll have, if we split up the time equally, let's see, 22 amendments divided by 20 minutes, we will maybe have 1 minute of debate, 1 amendment, or 1 minute of debate on this amendment. It'll be interesting to see how our friends on the other side of the aisle who talk about how they so strongly defend our intelligence community when they go visit them in the field, when our folks in the intelligence community see what they've done to them today, I would guess that they're going to get a very cold reception. And the other thing that they're going to do is they're going to have questions, and they're going to expect the majority to explain how they did this with no hearings, and they're going to have to explain exactly, now, what does this amendment do, and how does it impact us, and what does it mean, and how is it operational? I assume you knew that before you voted on it on the floor of the House. And my answer is going to be, I don't think they do. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time. Madam Speaker, I'm claim the time in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
I'd like to yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Since the other side doesn't want to talk about this amendment, I find myself having to come back to once again bring up the McDermott Amendment. And, you know, I would just appreciate, since there have been no hearings on this, and it slipped into this in the dead of night, just some questions that maybe someone on the majority can answer. I mean, remember, we're in a community now where the people at the front lines realize that when they've been asked by Congress and the President to do something, that 3 or 4 years later, they may be prosecuted for those very activities by following the requests of this Congress. We're talking about enhanced interrogation techniques. The record indicates that even people as high as the Speaker of the House, this House, knew about it, and yet this House is supporting those efforts to perhaps go back and prosecute this. And now we open up a whole new set of legal risk for our people in the intelligence community. I wish this thing just said follow the rules, but it doesn't. It's 11 pages of legalese creating all types of new and ambiguous rules for our people in the intelligence community. Would someone please answer the question, why did we never have any hearings on this? Why no discussion? Why no debate? Why does this amendment define a criminal offense that only intelligence community personnel would be guilty of? This only applies to intelligence community personnel. Answer the question. The amendment would make it a crime for depriving the individual of necessary food, water, sleep, or medical care. How does the bill define necessary? How will we explain that to the people in the intelligence community? The amendment would make it a crime to require someone to participate in acts intended to violate the individual's religious beliefs. Is there any objective standard to define that term, or is it subjective standard? Is there any requirement of reasonableness? The amendment would make it a crime to exploit phobias of the individual. Phobias? Could you explain why this would be a criminal offense for a member of the intelligence community, but not a criminal offense for a prosecutor who threatens a detainee with increased jail time if he does not cooperate? Just some simple questions. Questions that I would think people in the intelligence community would ask the next time someone from this body comes and visits with them and tells them how much we support them and how great of a job we think they're doing. I would think they'll hold this amendment up and say, "Sir, madam, did you vote for this? Did you understand what it meant when you voted for it? Could you explain it to me?" Somebody please answer these questions. We sure didn't have the opportunity to ask this in committee, to get any briefings on this, to have any hearings, someone explain this to it. But no, if the other side has its way, soon this will be law. With that, I reserve the balance of my time. I yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I wish they were plain and simple. It's 11 pages. 11 pages dropped in the middle of the night. No debate, no discussion, just inserted. If it's already a crime, why are you putting it in here? We haven't answered all the questions that we asked before. I noticed that the sponsor of the amendment, who was here for an extended period of time, I'm not sure if he wanted to speak on the amendment or not, but obviously wasn't given the opportunity to speak on the amendment if he wanted to. It's too bad, because I think there's a legitimate need for discussion and debate, because I don't think it's at all clear that this is just a restatement of current law. Answer the questions. The amendment would make it a crime to exploit phobias of the individual. Why is this a criminal offense for a member of the intelligence community, but for no one else? Not a criminal offense for a prosecutor. Why didn't we ever talk about this in committee? Why didn't we ever debate it?
Gentleman's time has
I
expired.
reserve the balance of my time. Thank you.
Gentleman is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, my colleague on the other side of the aisle is exactly right. The people in the intelligence community are watching exactly what we are doing, and actions do speak louder than words. The actions that they've seen, their colleagues were asked by this Congress, including the record shows the leadership of this House and the former administration, to do things on their behalf to keep America safe. And they see their colleagues now potentially being prosecuted because the rules changed under this administration. As they see the rules change for them and perhaps their colleagues being prosecuted, they see a global justice initiative coming out of the FBI where we are reading Miranda rights to our enemies on the battlefield in Afghanistan. They see the actions, and they see the actions are very, very different. They see that we are moving KSM from Gitmo to trial in New York City. Thankfully, the people in New York City are saying, no way, we're not doing it. And at the same time that KSM is being a promise to trial in civilian courts in the United States, they're seeing 11 pages of new vulnerabilities being placed on them after no hearings and no debate. Yes, our men and women in the field are seeing a real difference. They're seeing a real difference in actions by this Congress and by this administration. They see that they've become kind of a target of this administration. That this is now not about keeping America safe. It's about putting them into a legal framework, an ugly legal net.
Gentleman's time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I ask for a recorded
Michigan is
vote.
recognized.
I ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman has asked for a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 11419. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I'd like to claim the time in favor of the amendment.
The gentleman have an amendment to offer.
I have an amendment. Yes.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in House Report number 111-419, offered by Mr. Hoekstra of Michigan.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1105, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Hoekstra, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, this is a very straightforward amendment. I thank the Rules Committee for making it in order. It basically says that for not later than 30 days after the enactment of this act, the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency shall make publicly available an unclassified version of the report of the Inspector General regarding the procedures used in the narcotics air bridge denial program in Peru. Many of you may remember that this was a very tragic incident where, with the assistance of our intelligence community, 2 of my constituents were tragically killed in Peru, shot down by the Peruvian Air Force. We need an unclassified version of this report being made available to the public and, more importantly, to the families of those who were killed. You know, it wasn't that long ago, it was within the last month, that there was a discussion about accountability review. Almost 9 years after that tragic shootdown, there was an accountability board that had been convened, and its results had been made or were reported to our committee. 4 weeks ago, roughly 4 weeks ago, I asked the director of the CIA whether the families of those killed would be briefed on what was found in the accountability board and the accountabilities that were put in order. To date, I'm yet waiting for an answer. This has been unfair to these families. It's been unfair to the American public that when we've had such a tragic failing in the intelligence community, which included, from my perspective, an attempted cover-up by the previous administration or by the intelligence community as to exactly what happened, how it happened, and how these Americans were killed, that we have been so closed in sharing that information with the American public and the families. With that, I'd like to reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his